Oh my God, I'm alive, aren't I? I'm Dave, everybody. I'm an alcoholic, and thank you, Diane, for asking me to do this. It's a privilege to do this, and I hope I don't let the group down. I'm not going to look at the number at the bottom of the page because that might scare me. Uh, that's too many people. Um, my sobriety date is July 4th, 1982. Um, and I was commenting to being the age I am, I'm getting to experience some of the challenges of being the age I am. And this past week has been a particularly challenging one. Couple things have come down. It's like, oh, okay, okay, okay. And it occurred, the thought occurred to me, if I had not sobered up 43 years ago, I wouldn't have to experience this because I'd be dead. So I have to look at this as a gift. I'm here, and that's it. I'm going to follow the general format of what it was like, or what I was like, and what happened, and what's going on now. And I wish I had one of these stories about my drinking that would just keep you all in stitches, but that's not my story. So it's not going to take long. My first drink was at age 17. I was kind of a late bloomer. Uh, I'm senior in high school or my junior, I can't remember which, but I was with an older kid, and we went into a Shakey's Pizza parlor to get some pizza. I did not go in there to get a drink, but he said, "You want a beer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure," which was kind of surprising because my father is a Methodist minister, and my grandfather is a Methodist minister, and this is back in the days when Methodism meant we're Methodists, we don't drink, end of subject. And we never did. There was never any alcohol around me when I was um, growing up, and I didn't know anything about it. And So I went in and had this drink, just suddenly I felt like being rebellious, I guess. Um, Fast forward to 13 years later, and I'm being thrown in jail in Gove County, or excuse me, Delaware County, Oklahoma, for being drunk in public, and I'm indignant about it. You know, I mean, how dare they do this to me? Don't you know who I am? Um, in the big book, there's a section where Bill describes three types of drinkers: the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, and the real alcoholic. And when I look at that and read what it says about the moderate drinker, it says, not much. It just says you can take it or leave it. Don't have any problem with that. I started drinking at age 17, but not much, because I got in trouble the very first time I drank. My dad smelled alcohol in my breath. I didn't realize you could do that, and I didn't know he knew about that. But having been a chaplain in the Navy during the World War II, he probably had run into a few people. Anyway, I got in trouble because he informed me that if I wanted to drink, I could just move out that day. And so had my first period of sobriety right away and didn't drink again until I went off to college. And I drank some in college, like a lot of college kids do. Only now that I know more about how college kids drink, I was really a lightweight, got drunk a few times, but it didn't interfere with me getting through college. And I was out, I met this pretty girl. We got married our junior year, and we both became teachers, and we graduated, and I set out to make my career, make my mark, and alcohol didn't really cause much in the way of any kind of problems for a number of years. Um, so in 1970, of course, the draft was on and Vietnam War was on. And January of that year, January 1st, they had the lottery and my number came up 120. I knew I was going to be drafted by April if I didn't do something. So I joined the National Guard. And on July 5th, 1970, I stepped on a plane, having just gotten my degree and only married about a year and a half, and went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and went on down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, where I spent 4 months um, being trained for jungle warfare, which was the last thing I was interested in learning about. My focus was being a band teacher. That's what I had a degree in, was music education. And I stepped off that plane. I didn't know anybody. There were these mean-looking guys with these funny Smokey the Bear hats that yelled at you all day long, and you could never do anything well enough to please any of them. Um, and we were run ragged all day long, every day, and I was miserable, and it was hot and humid, and I wasn't used to that because in Kansas we don't have humidity like they do in Louisiana. And I was lonely. I missed my wife, and I was scared, and all these feelings that later I would have immediately thought about a drink. The interesting thing is I did not think about a drink that entire 4 months. It never occurred to me that a drink would be something to help with the problems I was facing at the time. After about a month and a half, or I think it was, we got our first freedom on base. We got 4 hours on a Saturday night to go within a restricted area on the base, and there was an enlisted men's club nearby that served beer, and so we knew about this about a week ahead, and we were in these open bay barracks, 80 man double bunks all the way down the side on 2 floors. And so all week long, the chatter is about, drinking, getting there, getting some beer and all this, which none of it got through to my ears. I didn't have any interest in that whatsoever. Come that Saturday evening, I had found out there was a thing called a soldier support building, and I went over there and checked out a trombone. I could do that. They had that, and I spent the evening practicing trombone because I was a trombone player. I want to get my lip back in shape because I want to be a music teacher. That was my reaction to that whole thing. So at that point, I know I was a moderate drinker because I left it alone for 4 months and never thought about it. I mean, I didn't even think about. I didn't decide to quit. I just like it was not part of the picture. Um, I don't have a period of my drinking where I can definitely identify that it was just that I was a hard drinker. I did not die a little bit before my time, so that check mark doesn't fit. Um, but the real alcoholic, it talks about, well, in the heavy drinker talks about if a sufficiently strong reason presents itself, that person can stop or moderate. So near the end of my drinking, probably about late 1981, we lived in the country 6 miles from the nearest volunteer fire department. We lived in a wood frame house that was built in 1919. There were no fire barriers between the studs. So that thing was a tinder box. And by this time, I was drinking to the point of either passing out or going into a blackout just about every night. And the bedrooms were all upstairs. We had 3 kids, ages 2 through 10 at that point. And I would drink until everybody had gone to bed and gone to sleep, and then drink some more, and finally go upstairs and go to bed. And one morning, and I was at that point of alcoholism where you don't sleep well. I'd go to bed about midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd be up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. That's all I could sleep. And so, typical morning, I'm stumbling downstairs at 5 o'clock in the morning, trying to get myself together so I can go to work. And I go into the kitchen. We had wooden cabinets all around that kitchen, including above the stove, which was gas, and all 4 burners on that stove were going full blast. And I was absolutely horrified when I walked into that kitchen because I knew I had turned those on the night before. I had no memory of it. And I didn't know about blackout then, but I had no memory of doing that. And now I know I was in a blackout. I have no idea what I was thinking or why I did that. Um, but that would be to me because it would have killed us all just like that had those caught fire. And they were pretty damn hot. So that's a sufficiently strong reason to quit or moderate. And it did not occur to me to quit or moderate. Well, maybe moderate because I thought about, well, how do I not drink to blackout? and I didn't come up with any solutions for that. So I know at that point I was a real alcoholic. Um, I love the big book because there's a whole lot of stuff in there where people, the experience of alcoholics is shared, and um, we can identify with that, and I do, and that attracted me. But there's also a whole lot of stuff where it talks to the family. It talks about the people around, and family's pretty important to me, and I think it was important to the guys who wrote the big book because they put a lot of emphasis on family. And there's some stuff that, like page 18, it talks about some things that are going on about how alcoholism affects everybody around you and causes, misunderstandings and fierce resentments and warped lives of blameless children and stuff like this. So, if there's any doubt that I'm an alcoholic, I want to read this to you. This is a poem my oldest daughter wrote. She wrote it in her 20s. She is a labor's lawyer, but she's also a very talented writer. And she was uh, at that point in her life writing some poetry and submitting it to some journals to try to get published. And she sent me an email one day and said, "Dad, my printer's broken. I need to get these five uh, poems printed off because this was the days you didn't email it in, you sent it in a letter. And can you print it for me?" And I said, "Sure." And this was one of the poems she sent. And she wasn't thinking, she didn't do this to hurt me. It was just one of the ones she wanted to submit. But the title of this poem is March 5, 1980. And what's significant about March 5, 1980 is that's the day her little brother was born. There's Sarah, then Rachel, and then John, okay? And so I'm going to read the poem to you because it gives you a pretty good picture of what our family was like, what alcoholism did to our family through her eyes. And I'm probably going to cry because I always do when I read this damn thing. Mom had everything ready to go when her water broke. When her sister and I arrived at the Sitters, there was a pan of lemon bars with us. The Sitters' 8 kids eyed them suspiciously, and I was not hungry. But the sitter got a spatula and scooped out a lemon bar for everyone. You can't go wrong with lemon bars. The crumbly cookie crust mingled with the fluffy lemon custard, like dust motes dancing in sunlight. Even the sitter's kids agreed that they were delicious. But somehow I got a bad one, and this is the secret I learned. In every sunny pan of lemon bars, there is one bad bar, no matter how you slice it. Because even when the sun shines like the love of God in the spring, there are spots where all the sun of the combined springs and summers of my 8 years would not dry out the dankness where woodlice and centipedes congregated, where slugs oozed endless slime, where things lost on the way to the Sunday church picnic came to rot, and even the sickly sweet of the lemon custard could not cover it. I already knew that Dad wasn't coming to get us from the Sitters, that we would be stuck, unwilling intruders, unwanted in this strange family for 8 days, until I pretended to be sick at school and he had to come get me. And I already knew that adding a little brother to a list of reasons for him to get drunk was not going to make anything get better. So that's the way it was. What happened? October 1981, I had a really bad binge weekend. I wrecked the car. A lot of other things happened, and I made my first, excuse me, first real attempt to quit drinking. What I found out was I could go, that's all I did was just to try not to drink. I could go about 2 weeks or maybe a week, and then my teeth would start to itch. And when that happens, you got to drink because that's the only thing that scratches them. Um, 9 months later, June 28, 1982, I was still failing at trying to quit drinking. Things were not getting any better. Um, my National Guard unit went off to summer camp in at Fort Ripley, or excuse me, Camp Ripley in middle of Minnesota. And I had been not drinking for about 2 weeks. And we left for that trip, and it was a convoy and took us 2 days to get up there. And I did, I had not drunk for 2 weeks. We stopped at a small town, parked around the fairground. Some of us walked downtown. I walked into a bar. I had two drinks, two beers, and I went back to the fairground and went to sleep. Did that 2 nights in a row, and I apparently thought now I had it. And the next day we got into camp, and I had a friend of mine who'd driven up take me into town, and I got a bottle of vodka because that was my drink, a fifth of vodka, because that would last me all for 2 weeks. I only had to have a couple sips out of it every day, and that would last me for 2 weeks. And of course, at 4 o'clock the next morning, I wake up on the floor of the latrine. And if you've never been on an Army barracks latrine floor at 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe you've been on a barroom floor or latrine floor. Anyway, it was not a pretty sight. But something had happened this time. The fact that I drank the blackout and had finished the bottle, even though I decided not to, was not new. But there was something broken inside me, and I didn't know what to do. Just absolutely was frozen. I went back to my bunk and just sat on the side of my bunk, and I couldn't move. And finally, the commander comes over and says, "What the hell is going on, Ruland?" And I said, "I need help." And he knew I needed help, and he was glad to hear me say that, but he wasn't really sure what to do with me. So he got two of the other guys and had us get on our uniforms, and we went over to where the medical people were. And I went on sick call that morning, sat around for 2 hours, just hung over and miserable, and just no idea what to do. And finally, this young medic comes over and gets me and takes me over this big warehouse all partitioned off with dividers and tables and on. I'm sitting on this table and she's taking my vitals and she says, "What's wrong, Sarge?" And I said, I started crying. I said, "I'm an alcoholic. I can't quit drinking," because I didn't know what else to say. And the truth came out. Excuse me. As she asked that question and as I answered it, excuse me, a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, who was another medic in that unit, happened to walk by. And she heard that question. She went to her commander and said, "I need to talk to that man alone." And he respected her sobriety and the change he'd seen in her, and he let her do that, go off duty and do this with me. And she 12-stepped me for about 45 minutes. And I know she told me about her drinking and some other stuff, but the only things I remember she said was that she said, "Please," in the morning, asking God for the strength to stay sober. And she said, "Thank you," at night if it had been a sober day. And she tried to stay close to her higher power, and she went to meetings. And that's probably all I could take in at the time. But I decided, okay, I'm going to give this a shot because nothing else is working. And there was something that happened in that moment. I mean, first of all, she walked into this room and said, "Hi, I'm an alcoholic." And there was this hope born that hadn't been there 2 seconds before. And it's like, whoa, maybe there's an answer. And I started not drinking, but this time it was different than the "I'm not drinking." It was this sense of being picked up. Years later, I realized that what I was experiencing was the presence of a higher power, presence of God in with me at that moment. I needed God. Bill talks about it when the moment when he says that the significance of that moment in Winchester Cathedral came back to me. For a minute, I wanted and needed God, and he came. That's exactly what happened to me at that point. I didn't realize it for some years later, but I had experienced that same feeling before when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Um, like I said, my dad was a minister. We were driving to the church one time. Um, I don't know why. It was just him and me, which was unusual because there's five kids and usually there's some other people around. But I'm going through the words to the Lord's Prayer in my mind, and I realized I knew them all. And I told my dad this, and he said, "Can you say it to me, Dave?" And I repeated it and apparently did it correctly. But I had that same feeling of being just kind of something there with me and me being okay. And that's that feeling that stuck with me for the rest of that 2 weeks that I was up there. I got to my first meeting about 5 days later on a weekend. This friend that took me to get my last bottle took me to the meeting um, and dropped me off. He was glad to see me go. There was a guy there named Chalmer, and his last name, and he's dead now, so I can say it. It was Chalmer Trusty. I thought, what a great name. And it was my first meeting. These people seemed excited to see me, and there was an electricity in the room, and I knew there was something here I wanted to get onto. And Chalmer had his ninth birthday that day. His wife came out from the Al-Anon meeting. We were in the backyard in a gazebo thing, and she comes out about halfway through the meeting and gives him his 9-year chip, and I just like, oh my God, this guy is like next to Christ. I think, how do you stay sober 9 years? It was quite impressive for me. But what I was met with at that meeting was warmth and welcome and love and laughter, and that's the thing that got me. Was like this. This is what it, this is where I need to be. And, if there's any newcomers here, I hope that you find that same warmth and welcome and love, and that you find some of the laughter, because it's the doorway to something real different. So that's what it was like, and that's what happened. And I want to talk the rest of the time, about what it's been like over 4 decades of being in AA. And I divided it up into a few periods. I call the first one shouting it from the housetops. Okay. Um, I got home, from our summer camp, and we got home on a Sunday. Tuesday night was the Oskaloosa, Kansas AA meeting, and I found it and walked down these stairs. It was in the basement of a flower shop in downtown Oskaloosa. And there was one guy sitting there, bald-headed guy, probably about 20 years older than me. He was the only one there. And I walked in, and there was a bunch of old, overstuffed furniture in this basement. And there was this chair that was covered in a harlequin fabric. And it was near where I was, and I looked at the chair and I said, "Is this chair taken?" And he said, "No, I've been saving it for you." I thought, man, these people are brilliant. How do they figure this stuff out? Um, anyway, Carl became my first sponsor. Um, and I he didn't really take me through the steps per se, but I knew I needed to somewhere I picked up that I needed to work the steps. And so when I got to my fifth step, I went and did it with Carl, and that sort of thing. But the other thing about this group was we had a core membership of about 5 people. Oskaloosa, Kansas is a town of about, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people. It's in a rural area. There's not a lot of folks coming to meetings there. Um, and you'd walk into the meeting, maybe you had the key to open it up, maybe you didn't, but whatever needed to be done, you just did it. I mean, maybe somebody said, "Hey, can you make coffee? I'm busy with this," whatever. But there was just this instant being included and given some responsibility. I mean, they didn't say, "Hey, we're going to give you a service commitment." They just said, "Hey, can you help with this?" And of course, can you pass out the books or whatever. What that did for me was that it very quickly made me feel part of that group. And I became very dedicated to it. In fact, that was my home group for quite a few years. Um, so over the years, I held all kinds of service positions in that, GSR treasurer. We just rotated. Everybody got to be everything because there wasn't enough of us not to. So I think I was GSR 4 times, or something like that. Um, but anyway, I started doing the steps. I got through all that stuff in a couple years, maybe a little faster than that. Um, but somewhere in the very beginning, I got the idea that you should work a step a month. I don't know where that came from, but that's what I decided to do. And so first month I'm on step one, I think. And of course, I don't know exactly what I'm doing to work step one, but that's what I think I am doing. And my wife and I, as I said, I direct a car, and I'm still paying on that dead horse that's sitting out behind the garage. So we're commuting to work about 40 miles in one car. And we get home one day and walk in and flip on the lights, and nothing happens. And it turns out that the electricity had been shut off because I had not paid the electricity bill for 3 months. And my wife burst into tears. She kind of knew that I should have been taking care of this stuff. And, I was so happy being sober, I didn't think about anything else. And so I had to face that pile of paper on the desk there and figure out what the heck was going on financially. And so I took financial inventory, and my wife and I sat down and we wrote a letter to everybody that we owed money to, because we were about, we were we were in a lot of debt and it didn't look pretty. We made up a plan to pay everybody back, get caught up in a year's time. And so we made this proposal to all these people we owed money to, and I sent out letters with our these letters with a self-addressed envelope saying, if you accept this, let me know one way or the other. But before I did this, I took it down to Carl, my sponsor, and said, what do you think of this, Carl? And he looked at it, he said, oh, this is wonderful. He says, you're making amends already. And I said, I can't be. I'm not, it's not the ninth month. I'm not there yet. But yeah, that's what I was doing. And what happened was that all of those people I owed money to wrote back and either accepted my terms or canceled the debt. Um, and I still have all those letters. I will always keep on those letters. I dig them out every once in a while, just read through it because it was such an outpouring of goodness from all these people who had no reason to treat me nice because I had lied to them and cheated and so forth and so on. And that month, when it came time to pay bills, I sat down to do that. My wife is absolutely terrified of the checkbook because she is terrible at numbers and she always screws it up. So it's always been my job. But I sat down to write the checks and pay the bills. And there was this strange feeling that came over to me. And I realized later, looking back, it's like that was a spiritual experience. I was doing the right thing with my money for the first time in years, tradition seven, being self-supporting. I didn't even know about tradition seven yet, but I experienced the gift of that at that point. Um, 1984, uh, uh, we in addition to the Oskaloosa group, we had found a group in an even smaller little rural town called Effingham, Kansas. Um, and it really felt like home to my wife, especially. She was raised on a wheat farm in central Kansas, and this meeting was held in a feed store. The owner of the feed store started the meeting there, and it was a pretty popular meeting. We were getting people, about 20, 30 people from all around that area. And in the spring of 1984, we'd been attending that about a year and a half and really enjoyed it. But a tornado hit Effingham, Kansas, and the feed store was damaged badly, and the whoever the authorities are condemned the building, and so we couldn't meet there. The owner of the thing, even though he's a member of AA and started that group, his house was so badly damaged that he was very focused on doing that. And the rest of us didn't know how to make a group start going again. And so me and uh, three other guys from down where I lived, we started a new group in Valley Falls, Kansas. We called it the Valley Falls Home Group because we met in our homes. Eventually, we moved into a community building um, in Valley Falls and met there until that group died. It finally died because of some anonymity breaks, but that was a kind of exciting thing. That was also the year I decided to go back to grad school. I'd been a teacher And I got to the point of, having been sober long enough, it was like, I've got to decide what to do. Do I want to go back into teaching? And I didn't. I just didn't see how I could take the pressure of that at this point. And so I decided to go back to school and go into social work. After I talked to a counselor that I'd seen a couple of times, and he encouraged me to think about that. I wanted to work with alcoholics and drug addicts, and he encouraged me to get a degree in social work. So I went back to grad school. 1985, I went to Montreal, Canada with my whole family for the 50th anniversary international, which was an amazing trip. On the way back, my National Guard unit was again in Minnesota that summer, and um, so we went through. We went home from Kansas, Montreal to Kansas via Minnesota, and they dropped me off at Little Falls, Minnesota. We stayed with a guy uh, who I'd contacted through the meeting directory, the Western United States meeting directory. They had paper copies in those days, and he, I told him I was trying to find this Charmer trustee. He said, "I know Charmer." He said, "You can come stay with me for a couple nights while you guys are waiting for this thing to start." And I got a house and it's just me, and there's plenty of rooms, and so we did. Um, and I don't know if it was the first night or the second night, but he said, "Hey, you want to go to a meeting?" I said, "Sure." And off we take it through these woods. I don't know where we're going. It's dark. And he explains to me that we're going to the county jail. And my only experience with the county jail some years before was not pleasant. And I kind of thought, what? You know? And he explained that he had been incarcerated there on a white collar crime for a year and nobody had brought meetings in. And he had started bringing in meetings and been doing it for years. And he was very dedicated to doing that. And so we get to this thing and go through the clanging doors and all this. I'm getting more and more nervous. And we walk into the room and where it's going to happen. And he says, "You're going to be the speaker tonight." you know, and I kind of swallowed hard and he explained that, he was the only one that came. The guys were tired of hearing his story. They needed to hear somebody else's story. And so we did the meeting and that was fine. And I didn't think too much more of that other than when, as we drove home, I thought, well, that was pretty cool. But I didn't immediately jump into corrections work. But some years later, that became very important to me. About 10 years later, um, I was still living in this rural county in Jefferson County in Kansas, and the they had tried to pass a bond issue to build a new jail, which was desperately needed. And they finally did. And the sheriff and the captain of the jail, the man who was going to be the captain of the corrections, drafted a letter and sent it to me and said, when this opens up, we want AA to be in this jail. Can you help us? And I had met them both through some community work that had nothing to do with AA, but they knew I was in AA. And so I didn't hesitate, because of that experience in that jail, 10 years earlier. It was like, yeah, I need to do this now. And we started doing that in 1995. I'm still taking meetings into that jail. It's been one of the most rewarding service works I've ever done. Um, Phase B, letting the gifts of the program take me away from the program. My first sponsor left AA, just kind of quit coming. He'd come about once every 2 years, pick up a chip, but that was it. So I started sponsor shopping, and that went on for several years, alternating with periods of the ism of alcoholism. I sponsor myself. Surprisingly enough, I stayed sober through all that. But there was a period in there when I got down to one meeting a week because I was going to graduate school. I was working full time. I was in social work, so I was doing an internship. Plus, I'm still in the National Guard. I'm doing weekends with the National Guard. And I'm in a band that's trying to, rehearse and meet and gig around. I've gotten a little busy and I've kind of gotten a little away from AA. And Usually when I went to the meeting, Oskaloosa group had kind of almost died at this point. I'm usually showing up there and nobody else shows up. And fortunately, I was doing an email group. This was the early days of any kind of online stuff. There's a group called Trudgers. I don't know if they're still going or not, but whoever was the leader would pick a topic for the week, um, and then we'd share about this. And this woman shared one day about seeing herself in the bedevilments on page 52. And I went to page 52, and all eight of those things, it was like check, 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 check. Oh my God, I'm in deep trouble. Um, so I realized I needed to do something. So the next phase was getting back in the middle of the boat. So I added some different meetings, and I tried a couple different sponsors, and I upped my service work. I started getting involved in district stuff, um, doing the jail meetings. I started going to area meetings. Um, um, but I didn't quite keep the triangle balance, the unity service. I got a little too heavy on the service side. So I kind of had to reset again. So that's the next phase was I got a new sponsor, and this time something clicked. Steve took me through the steps in a way I'd never been taken through before, and they really came alive to me at that point. Um, Now, at this point, the Oskaloosa group is still my group. It kind of comes and go, ebbs and flows. But I went through a period where nobody was coming to the meeting about from November to March, and I was the only one that ever showed up. And I realized that this group was dying, that I needed to disband the group and all that. But like I said, we're in a basement and there's a lot of overstuffed furniture and it's a cold winter, and I have a little compact pickup truck, and this, I can't stomach the idea of just abandoning all this stuff in the basement of this building, because that'll give a bad impression to the owners about AA. I just can't do that. So I make up my mind I'm going to hold on until the end of March. The weather get a little bit better. If nobody else shows up by then, I'm going to haul it all out of there at that point. And the last meeting, the last Saturday in March, three people with a lot of sobriety showed up. They'd moved into the area. They wanted to have that meeting going, and it came back to life. So I didn't have to haul the couches out. Years later, it was taken care of us for all of us when the building caught fire and it all burned. So um, HP doing for us what we can. 1999, we decided to move to Lawrence. Our kids had grown and left, and we're out in the country in this big old two-story house, and we're spending all weekend cleaning it. And we're getting more involved with people with like interests in Lawrence, Kansas, and we finally decided to move here. And in 2001, I decided I needed to change home group, so I joined Eye Opener Group. Um, the guy I'd had as a sponsor took me through the book, had engaged in some behavior. I just couldn't continue to take my stuff to him, so I changed sponsors for the last time, and my sponsor now um, is Dean, and he will have 50 years August 21st. Dean has been with me for a long time. Um, the next phase is what I will call waiting for the other shoe to drop. About 2001, I started thinking, boy, things are going really good. What happens when something really bad happens? And in the next 4 years, a grandniece died. My youngest brother died. My son went to Iraq. And then my father-in-law died. Boom, 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 boom. So I found out what happens when the other shoe drops. The next phase I call cunning, baffling, and powerful. Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin. That's a quote from Al Pacino from The Devil's Advocate. Those of you who've seen the movie. I got a lot more sponsors after 2010 when I retired. And I started taking area level service jobs, and got a lot of kudos and invitations to speak. I became the delegate. I didn't see how big my head was getting, even though I thought I was trying to keep very humble and small. And I fooled myself. And the next phase was sober. Son of a bitch, everything's real. Becoming a past delegate, and I don't know how many of you may have gone through that, but it was the toughest transition I've ever gone through. I went overnight from being the center of area service work to kind of being really kicked to the curb, being on the sidelines. So that was January of 2020. And so 2 months, no guidance on how to do this, and then COVID hits. And then about 4 months later, 5 months later, one of my favorite sponsees died of alcoholism, died of seizures and withdrawal. Young man, tough stuff to go through. I've got 27 names in front of my big book of people who've been, uh, they say make the ultimate sacrifice. I just consider them to be casualties of the war we're in. And I don't want to forget them. I don't want to forget him, but he's the hardest one that I've had to go through. So I basically had to kind of learn to laugh at myself, and I'm now truly an expert. And if you don't know what an expert is,
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Um, an X is a has been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So I'm now a has been drip under pressure. Thank you. Next, the next phase is what I call a new attitude and outlook, which is the promises on page 84. I got some new sponsees. In fact, I got one just yesterday. No, wait, this is Saturday, isn't it? I got him just this morning. He has me sponsor him. Um, I don't know how many sponsees I have right now. Somewhere around 13, 14, something like that. Um, that's great. That's great. That keeps me right down there in the trenches where I need to be. And what I'm seeing going on in both the district and the area and in my group is that there are new people who are stepping up and growing to service work, which I think is great. Our district has had some exciting growth. Jefferson County, Kansas, that rural district I used to live in, there were two groups there that died. The Valley Falls Home Group did, and the Oskaloosa Group did. Those have both come back to life recently. It's been so exciting to see that. It just touches my heart. It was like what a gift. And I see the torches being passed, and I know AA is going to be in good hands for the future. Um, I hope everybody keeps it up because I'm pretty sure some more of my family is going to need it. There's some of them out there that it's like, what's going on? So, in closing, um, I don't know how many of you listen to the Grapevine podcast. I listen to it every week, and there's some great stuff on there. I'm going to just this was shared there, and I love it. I used it. I used it when I was asked to give the eulogy at another sponsee's funeral. He had a workplace accident and was killed at work, and the family asked me to deliver the eulogy. And everybody, I mean, it was an AA funeral. There was none of there was no secret about this. Um, so I shared this story both to start and stop the service with, and it really touched me. It's just so there was a 12-year-old girl who's was going to a parochial school, and she came home one day and told her parents that her teacher had given the assignment to write an essay on what religion was she raised in and what are three things that she's gained from that or learned from that. And her mother immediately started apologizing to her. She said, we're so sorry. We haven't raised you in any particular religion. I'm so sorry. And she said, Mom, don't worry about it. I got this. And so in her essay, the girl wrote that she was raised in the Church of Alcoholics Anonymous. And from this, she had learned three things. A, everybody gets a seat at the table. B, everyone deserves a second chance. And C, our job is to take care of each other. Thank you.